All right. So I would like to first welcome you to the college admissions success or secrets to success webinar. What we want to do today is really kind of go through. I know it's June, seems like it's early times, but it's not early times because there's a lot of people that are way ahead of the game and they are getting ready for the upcoming admission season. Now, this webinar is going to be covering really primarily those individuals that are going to be applying mostly to school in the 12th grade and obviously for next year. So for fall 2025, they're going to be matriculating, really applying in fall 2024. But we are also going to talk about those individuals who are essentially rising sophomores, rising juniors, and then rising seniors, because there are things that we can also do to prepare for that. So without further ado, I know we got a ton of material to cover through. If we really feel that we've missed out on things to cover and you guys feel like there's some stuff that we really need to cover again, we can definitely do another webinar and we can kind of dive a little deeper into some of the other areas. So I'm going to skip certain parts of the admissions, how do I say it, main pillars, because there's just so much to cover. We only got 1 hour to do it. And usually we do this over weeks and so forth. So we're just going to give you a high level overview, but feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we can definitely try to address those accordingly. So let's get to it. And I have my colleague. All right, so we're going to be doing this. I'm not going to be really in control of the slides. It's going to be my colleague doing that for me. So I apologize if I have to say move forward, so don't get too distracted with that. So quickly, by way of background, who am I and why do I feel that we are able to do what we're doing and I'm qualified to do what I'm doing? Is I started Right Track Admissions, the company that's leading this webinar, back in 2008, largely because of my own personal journey, having gone through the admissions process, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but actually 5 times. And through that process, I learned so much about how to really structure an application to get yourself noticed and get yourself into top programs that you otherwise do not think you qualified to get into. And it's really, in terms of my own story and my own struggles, I really suffered taking the SAT, not once, not twice, but 3 times, taking the LSAT, not once, not twice, but 3 times, taking the GRE, not once, but twice. So I've taken these standardized tests so many times and suffered each time I had to take it. And so I had to find a way that that would allow me to kind of really stand out despite these poor standardized scores. So thankfully, because of my ability to understand how the application process worked, I was able to get into UCLA. I started in UC Santa Barbara. My first application obviously was into UC Santa Barbara. Then I transferred to UCLA, so that was another application process I went through. Then I went to law school, so that was the third application process I went through. Then I went to Cambridge in England for my master's degree. That was my fourth application process I went through. And finally, I went to Harvard for my master's in public administration. So that was the last admissions cycle that I had to go through. And in each one, I learned so much about the processes. But I started this company in 2008. And since then, we've worked with thousands of applicants from around the world in terms of getting into top college programs. Okay, moving along. So when thinking about this, I'm going to skip the part that basically discusses, is college right for you? Now, at the end of this webinar, we're going to talk to you about a college admissions mastery course that I put together because I really felt there was so much information I wanted to cover. I can't do it only on these webinars. And so I wanted to help those people, especially those that don't end up taking our services, to really be able to get a lot of the learnings that we've developed over the last 16 years. And so I put it together in a college admissions mastery course. And in that, the first couple of chapters really discusses, is college right for you? Are there other alternatives to college? And if college is right for you, how do you even start thinking about it? And so the way that we would do that is really through developing your brand, your personal brand. Now, if you guys were sitting in front of me, I would be asking you guys, define for me what personal brand means. So let's get a little bit into it. So When thinking about your personal brand, is it better to say, here's my personal brand and I'm just going to apply to college, or thinking about what do colleges look for and how does my personal brand fit into that? So I actually want to start with talking about it from the college perspective. These 5 C's, I want you to kind of keep in mind. I'm going to be doing a lot of these kind of mnemonics or thinking about these abbreviations to help you think through the processes. But these 5 C's is really what colleges look for. And that's important because you can reverse engineer that in terms of building your personal brand, not inauthentically. You already have your values, you already have your personal ideas of kind of who you are. But it's important to kind of align that with what the schools look for, right? So the first thing we want to kind of underscore that is schools look for people who are well-rounded. Not only with a high IQ, which you guys obviously know, but a high EQ, right? Those that have intelligence, emotional intelligence, ability to communicate, ability to lead, ability to be part of a team, right? Ability to understand how to get through difficult situations. Schools really, really care about that because these are qualities that you really need in the job world. And we're also going to talk about this in terms of future proofing yourself from automation and AI down the road. And we'll talk a little bit about this in one of the slides towards the end. Now, in here, these are some of the key things that the schools look for. They want someone who's collaborative, has strong leadership skills, strong teamwork skills, right? Someone who is by nature collaborative. They want to find someone who is creative, right? And that's part of that whole well-rounded capability. They don't want someone who's just myopically focused on history or political science or the sciences or mathematics, but someone who has a whole variety, especially in America. And why do I know that? Because they have minors, they have multiple majors, right? They have the ability to audit classes. They have GEs, right? General education requirements, for the purpose that they want individuals who are well-rounded, not just myopically focused. The days of just hyper-focusing on one field are over, right? To future-proof yourself, you have to have an interdisciplinary approach to your education. And that's why I think it's important that you have creativity as well as maybe mixed with the technical, right? So you have both aspects. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. A sense of compassion, right? Being open-minded, ability to understand other people's narratives. That's so, so, so important, especially as, in terms of the diversity in this world, the divisiveness that we see in America and in other parts. It's so important, right? It's so important that that you are seen to be open-minded and compassionate with others, so that you can get along with other people. You can learn from other people. You have the humility to learn from other people. Okay, a sense of curiosity, to me, that's paramount. That's really how I've lived my life. In fact, I have a motto for a passion project that says "Stay curious," because I think if you stay curious and always trying to learn and foster that passion you have by maintaining a sense of curiosity to keep wanting to learn more, you really prevent yourself from brain atrophy. You prevent yourself from simply, relinquishing yourself to just myopic career paths and the inability to really want to open up and adapt. Again, that comes down to that concept of future proofing, is that sense of curiosity. And finally, a sense of commitment. Universities do not want you to start school, college, and then a year into it drop out. Look, we've got the Microsoft, the Bill Gates and the other individuals that all dropped out during first or second or third year, the Zuckerbergs and so forth. Those are anomalies. These schools want you to be in there and committed. You're taking your classes, you're finishing your course loads. Teachers are not all over you trying to get you to submit assignments. They want you to have a strong commitment and work ethic. So these are what the schools are looking for in terms of college, those 5 C's. Now that you know them, let's start thinking about how do you apply them in terms of your personal brand. Next slide. All right. So these are how you would create your personal brand, by creating your story, right? And we have this motto at Right Track, which is live your story. I say that especially even now in June, for those rising seniors, when you're going to be applying in the fall, you still have 3 months to kind of create your story, right? You still have the ability for seeding those experiences that you're going to write about in those college application essays, right? So if you're a rising junior or a rising sophomore, right, or even an entering freshman, you've got 1, 2, 3 years to really kind of create those life experiences that you're going to talk about in your essays. So this is something very, very important. And this is how you create your story and thereby creating your kind of brand, who you are, right, what you stand for. I'm going to quickly run through this list. So something to kind of think about. Nothing here that's going to completely, blindside you, but it says be proactive about life. Don't just kind of sit there and Netflix and chill and expect life to happen to you. You've got to go out there and embrace those experiences, embrace those challenges, right? Challenging those core beliefs. There's an essay in the UC application that literally asks you, give an example of where you stood up against an existing belief or your own belief and how you challenged it, right? And what you learned from it. Take risks. Another very important aspect of this whole thing is also how do you take risks, and how do you deal with the headwinds that kind of come from taking those risks that may or may not work, from in terms of the failure that may come from taking a risk. How do you set goals for yourselves? How do you accomplish them, right? Give us examples of how you've done that. Do that for yourself. Set a goal. It could be a wellness goal, a health goal. It could be a goal like for me, I want to see every country in the world. That's a lifelong goal. And what do I learn in that process, in that journey? Have a sense of vulnerability. Be ready to kind of dig deep about yourself and kind of explore who you are, really kind of have those really introspective conversations, right? Socially be vulnerable, academically be vulnerable. Take those classes that are a little bit outside of your bandwidth. I mean, not your bandwidth, but your areas of competency, just so that you can learn other things and show and exhibit that curiosity, right? Scholarship, read. I put in there, read, audibles, podcasts. I'm constantly listening to podcasts, largely so that I can kind of really satiate my curiosity and learn so much so quickly, right? So that's in terms of scholarship and really learning, because some of the essays will ask you and some of the schools will ask you, hey, give us examples of your favorite podcasts, of your favorite books, of your favorite magazines, of your favorite websites, right? And you want to have something that's really authentically that you actually listen to. Be creative. We already spoke about that. Leadership and teamwork. We spoke about that. Having a community, that mentorship that can also help guide you through this process. We're going to speak about that. And socialize. It's so important to develop that EQ. You have to have a strong sense of a strong ability to kind of learn from other people as well. Next slide. Okay, and so now that you've thought about what the schools are looking for, and you've thought about how to build your story and build your brand and who you are through these experiences, these life experiences, now let's start gathering the data and putting it all together. So on one hand, you want to kind of start writing together like a list of like top things that really have impacted you and really led to kind of create who you are. Your extracurricular activities, your summer activities, your volunteer activities, right? Your professional internships, part-time work, your academics, the honors, the different things that you've done. I kind of write in there something called a brag list, as you guys can see in there. And a brag list is something that you're going to be using, especially to give recommenders, to kind of show them who you are, what you've done, especially whether it's in their classroom or in that after school activity or in that organization or whatever it is, right? So you kind of create a brag list that you can kind of share with them. And then those life experiences, that kind of introspection, that self-reflection that allows you to really think, dig deep. And that's what gives that sense of authenticity in terms of who you are, the values that you have, and we're going to speak about this, and how do those values translate into what you do, right? Which is literally the definition of what authenticity is that the values that you espouse, that you say that you live by, how are you acting based upon them? Okay, so first thing you want to do is kind of put together a resume and then lists of those experiences, right? You can put it in a Google Doc or whatever. Then I want you to kind of think about in terms of data gathering, developing a SWOT analysis. This is something that we do at Right Track for our clients, is that we develop these SWOT analyses along with psychometric tests to kind of better understand who they are and where their blind sides and where are things that we can double down on in terms of their superpowers. So we've got their strengths, we maximize them. We try to mitigate their weaknesses. We try to manage their opportunities and try to minimize the threats, right? And we put them all out in terms of a SWOT analysis that helps them kind of direct which direction and how they best should prepare for the application process. And then finally, once you've kind of put all those things together, start looking at different universities, and we're going to get much more into that. But what I really want to kind of highlight here in terms of gathering your data is gathering which schools would be of most interest. Now that you know who you are, what the colleges are looking for, then you're going to kind of drill down and kind of focus on specific colleges. And we're going to get into how to pick those colleges in a little bit. Next slide. All right, so now let's start assembling the application itself, which is no joke, right? There's a lot going on there, and so we want to kind of dig into that. So let's get into it. All right, so here are the different components of the application. First, we kind of left off where we were talking about selecting schools. So we've got to start selecting schools as one of the first main components of the process. And we're going to also talk to you about a little bit of a timeline that we're going to kind of map out for you, so you kind of know, like, when should I already start thinking about which schools I'm interested in, right? We're going to talk a little bit, or I guess I can mention it right now, the common application. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. But with the common application, it goes out to almost over, I think at this point, over 1,000 schools. I think when it first started off, it was only like 100 or less. And now we're up to 1,000 schools that use the common application. But don't be fooled. Some schools will just take the common application and that's it. A lot of other schools will ask for school-specific essays and application questions. And so you have to be ready for that. You may submit an application to, let's say, Columbia or Yale, or some of the other universities like Georgetown or NYU through the common application, and then they will ask you for specific essays just for that school because they want to see how committed you are to them. Then and we already talked about developing your resume. We're going to get into quickly an overview of how to kind of structure your resume. Next slide. And then we're going to very lightly touch on standardized testing, mostly because I have PTSD from standardized testing, so I really don't want to talk about it because otherwise I'll probably have a nervous breakdown. Don't freak out. It's just me. I really suck at them. We're going to talk a little bit about letters of recommendation, touch on the financial aid and scholarships, and then finally the college interview as well. And I think we may touch on that, and if not, then hopefully we can try to cover it in another webinar down the road. All right, so these are the main components of what the application process includes. Move on. So let's start with a little bit about picking the right university. Now, when thinking about the university, here are some key things to focus on. Some of you guys may be like, I already picked my university. I already know it's going to be close to home, and I really don't care other than that. But some of you are really kind of painting a very wide brushstroke, and you're going to be like, I am going to be looking at all kinds of different university options. Okay, if you're going to be looking at all kinds of university options, you want to be thinking about location. Is it going to be out in the middle of nowhere, kind of like Cornell, or in the smack in the middle of the city, like NYU? Is it going to be close to home? Is it going to be far from home? You want to be away from your family, or do you want to be close to your family? Hot climate like Arizona, cold climate like Buffalo, right? You want to be thinking about that. And again, I'm going to be using a lot of U.S. references here. Size, is it going to be a major university like University of Texas, where or like A&M, I think, which has like 50,000 students, or is it going to be like a Swarthmore with like 3,000 students? Is it going to be public like USC, like UCLA, or private like USC, right? That's going to be important in terms of decision making, in terms of size, right? Academic programs, do they have your major? Like UCLA, I always give this example, doesn't, I believe, have international business, but USC does. And so do you decide to go to USC because of a major, or do you go to UCLA because they have, certain things about level of competition and so forth, maybe, more akin to you, or it may have a major or a minor that's closer to you, or maybe because you want to go to a public school versus private. Reputation, is a top 10 program, is it a mid-tier program? The resources, financial aid, obviously, is a massive, issue, especially as schooling has become so expensive. When I went to UCLA as an undergrad, I got a lot of Cal grants, Pell grants, scholarships because I did well academically. We'll talk a little bit about that in terms of financial aid. But it was very affordable, $10,000, $15,000. Now you're looking at $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for in-state. It's bananas. So you got to obviously think about tuition as well. You want to think about the campus vibe in terms of diversity, sports programs. If you're an international student, is that the environment you want to be in, right? The network, the strength of the alumni. Now, for example, if you plan to live in LA, maybe it's better to go to Loyola Marymount over Vanderbilt because it's out in Tennessee, even though Vanderbilt's ranked much better than Loyola Marymount. But maybe you want to be in LA with a closer alumni network there. You want to look at the faculty. Maybe there's a professor that's doing specific research in an area that you're really interested in, so that kind of gears you towards that. Maybe also look at career development. Some schools have really great resources at job placement, others don't. So that's going to be something that's going to be important as well. All right. Quickly, as we've talked about what to think about, let's think about what not to think about in terms of what to avoid when picking schools. And a lot of times people fall back on this accidentally. You don't want to follow schools that your parents and your friends are going to simply because they went there. That's not good enough. You're trying to blaze your own trail. You don't want to rely on reputation or rank alone, like have that Harvard or bust mentality, right? You don't want to go to a school without having ever researched it or learned anything about it or even done a virtual tour or they can, like any kind of talk to anyone about it. Like you definitely want to know what that school's about. So when you apply to the schools, you want to at least have done your diligence about it. Don't apply to a school simply because of the financial aid. Like some schools, let's say you get into Harvard with no money, right? But then you get into, I don't know, Occidental College and you get 100% scholarship. I would probably advise you against, foregoing Harvard to go to Occidental just because they gave you more money. Because chances are, when you graduate, you're going to get a pretty damn good job after having gone to Harvard or a great graduate school that's going to make it allow you to pay it back in dividends down the road. Plus, and we'll talk about this, when you start school, you can still find scholarships and financial aid at a school that may not have given it to you initially. Like me, when I was at UCLA, I got some grants, but no scholarships. And then after my second year as a transfer, my final year as a transfer student, I was able to get almost a full ride because I had gotten great grades. And so I was able to get scholarships there. So just think about that. The last thing I want to quickly mention to you, super important, is diversifying your school options. You can see in this graph right here, it's like a bell curve. We always advise clients to apply to 2 or 3 reach schools. Reach schools are pretty much like 0 to 15% chance of admission. Double downing on the target schools, the ones that are not like near impossible. So those are going to be like 15 to 40% chance of admissions, right? And then get a couple of safeties just in case it doesn't work out and you're not ready to go to community college or take a gap year. Then you can have a couple of safety schools. And then the idea is that you go to a safety school and then transfer from the safety school to another program that you may want to go to. So always, always, always important to diversify in terms of having 2 or 3 reach schools, maybe 4 to 6 target schools, and 2 to 3 safety schools. But make sure even those safety schools you're willing to go to in case it doesn't work out. Then you don't want to be like, oh, I applied to I don't know what school and I was never planning to go there. Like think about the school that you'd actually want to go to in terms of a safety school. I think in college I applied to at least 10 or 12 schools. In law school I applied to like 17. So I really want to kind of diversify to give myself the best chance of admission because I didn't want to wait another year without getting admitted. Next slide. Now, I'm going to quickly go through this because it is an important factor when you're going through the process of how to select the right major. So let me just kind of run through the list, thinking about a major that aligns with a passion, something you're really good at, something you love. Some people say this, I listen to a lot of podcasts and they say, don't follow your passion, follow what you have a natural talent in, right? What is your natural superpower? What you find exciting that other people feel is a chore or a job. And for me, for example, I love history. I loved history. So I didn't just, and yes, some people would say, well, what are you going to do with a history major? Well, once I went to history and I crushed it at undergrad because I loved taking the classes, I enjoyed it. I always did well. So I had a very pleasurable 4 years. And when I graduated, I parlayed the history degree into applying to law school. So, and then went down that track and then did a couple of masters in policy and so forth. And so there's all kinds of things you can do it. And now I'm running an admissions company that has nothing to do with history, but it was something that I loved to do when I was undergraduate. So not always what you decide to study in school, you're end up doing. Think about what's going to prepare you for a career. Here's something that is important if you're planning to embark on a certain career path, such as engineering or accounting or any of the medical things. Then you've got to obviously think about a major that feeds into that because you otherwise can't do it unless you want to go back to school and get your credentials again. Earning potential. Some people don't care about making a ton of money. They care more about a certain standard of life in terms of enjoying their life. So maybe somebody would become an English literature or a creative writing major because they don't care about the earning potential. Somebody else is going to be like, I really want to make a lot of money and have a lot of job security in the future, so I'm going to become a doctor. Thinking about graduate programs, if you're thinking about going to, law school is a real aberration. MBA programs are a real aberration because you can almost study anything and do those. But again, let's just say you want to go down the road and do an engineering master's. It's going to be near impossible to do an engineering master's if you did history. So obviously, what is your direction in terms of what do you want to do in graduate school, and then obviously make sure at least one of the majors and covers that area. And then finally, the one that I kind of added more recently was job demand. What are the market trends, right? Given our increasingly AI and automated world, right? Because that's also important. Do you want to do something that's super automatable, right? Even if you study STEM, but if you're doing something that computers can do because it's repetitive, then you're going to be out of a job. So what's the point, right? So, and we're going to talk about this when you get into future proofing. This is something else I'm going to be adding to the mastery course. I'm going to be writing a chapter this summer and adding that to the mastery course itself, because I just think knowing what you want, knowing how to prevent yourself from becoming redundant and obsolete is so important, even as early as high school into college. Now, there are other things that you want to be thinking about. If you apply undecided, and you can ask questions about this later on, but if you can apply undecided, you can also have multiple minors and multiple majors that can also help you have a more well-rounded education experience. Next slide. Here's quickly, in terms of the resume, it was one of the talking points in terms of the different components: education, professional experiences. I think a lot, if you don't have professional experiences, get rid of it. Go from education to volunteer, extracurriculars. Obviously, those you definitely should have. Your interests and other skills that you may have that are unique to you. And then throughout that resume, you conclude other areas. And there I have, as is in like publications, certificates. Let's say you got a CPR certificate and so forth. So, you can put that in there. Anything that would be like deemed would be that you want the school to know about, that kind of distinguishes you as a candidate. So just some things to think about in terms of resume structure right there. Next slide. Letters of recommendation, super important, obviously. Letters of recommendation really supplement your application and provide the admissions committee with a third perspective, or a third party perspective, I should say, of your application that is devoid of your influence, right? So they want to see someone who can substantiate and corroborate what you were talking about in your application itself, right? So that's the real purpose, what it is, right? And why it's important. When you should ask for the letters of recommendation, I'd say at least 2 to 3, 4 months. I'd say 2 to 3 months before they're due, so that you give the recommender the courtesy of having a long window to put the letter of recommendation together and not feel like they're rushed towards the end. Who do you ask? Well, in terms of who do you ask, you definitely want to have at least one that's academic. If you have 2 that are academic, that's okay. If you have 3 letters of recommendation that the school asks, I would say 2 academic, and then a third one that provides another facet of who you are. So in this case, extracurricular could be like a coach or a club advisor, or extracurricular club advisor or organization. Professional, if you have like a supervisor, if you've worked part-time, full-time, even as a high school kid, if you had to do that. In terms of volunteer work and so forth, from that perspective, you can get one of those individuals to write your recommendation. A current student of that school, an alum of that school, also can help really kind of make you kind of stand out, so that person can vouch for the fact that you would be a great fit to that school. Who should you not ask, right? I would say do not ask a family member or a friend, because if they find out in terms of their connection to you, they would think that the letter is biased and it's not an objective letter, so to speak. It would be influenced towards you. So you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't ask somebody you aren't 100% sure would support you and be a cheerleader for you. If you're like, yeah, I think I have a good relationship with them, but I'm not 100% sure how they would write it, then don't do it. Don't take that risk, because if they write a half-baked letter, it could really hurt you. And don't ask someone who's a VIP that you barely know, and they're going to write a very standard letter that's just copy-pasted from like ChatGPT or something, for the sake of someone who you do know very well, but is not very well known. So, for example, don't ask the principal of your high school to write you a letter of rec if your teacher can write a better letter of rec, because they know you far better, right? Because the school will weigh the contents of your letter over who wrote it. Okay. And when you ask them, I would always say, be respectful, be polite, start off by, emailing them, and then ask if you can come in and speak with them, and then show them your resume, maybe even show them a draft of your personal statement, so they have a better sense of what schools you're applying to and why you're going to college in terms of your major and your career goals, so they can write a letter that's more bespoke to you. All right, moving on. Next slide. All right. In terms of financial aid, as you see, there's a lot going on in this slide. So let's just quickly give you an overview. There are obviously scholarships as options that are um, geared towards certain communities, certain diverse communities, and so forth. If you want to know more about scholarships and fellowships that may be available to you from that school, make sure that you talk to the financial aid office at that school. They can give you some information there in terms of saying, oh, these are common scholarships that usually people apply to from our programs. There's loan-based and loan programs as well, so you should learn more about those. Are subsidized, which means that I believe you don't have to pay the interest on it until you graduate, and unsubsidized, which means you have to start paying interest almost immediately. Obviously, you can imagine subsidized would be far better. There are grants, and remember, grants are not necessarily scholarships, but they're just financial aid to you that you don't have to pay back, versus scholarships, which could be tied to a certain requirement that if you fail that requirement over time, like maintaining a certain GPA or what have you, they can take that scholarship away from you. We'll talk a little bit about this as well, but negotiating your financial aid is going to be important as well. So if let's say you get into two schools like USC and UCLA, which are quite comparable in terms of ranking, unfortunately, I don't know why they would be, because I think UCLA is awesome. That's where I graduated. But let's just say you got into both those schools and you can play one off the other to try to get some financial aid from there. It's telling USC that UCLA gave you 10 grand. Can they match it? USC comes back, says, I'll give you 10 grand. You go to UCLA and say, hey, listen, USC gave me 10 grand. Is there any way that you can do a little bit better than that? And then see until you reach a limit, and then kind of go from there. And obviously, like I said, you can always get financial aid when you are applying, or when you start school. You can always get financial aid and work study and so forth as a student. Here's some resources I kind of have for you, scholarship databases and so forth, but you got to think about this. Getting scholarships and financial aid in and of itself is almost like a full-time job, which makes sense because you're going to get money out of it, kind of like a job. So you really want to devote a lot of time to research that and make sure there's no rock that's unturned. You really want to kind of dig deep and make sure that you've tried everything. And again, if you're admitted without enough scholarships and grants, take on the debt, knowing that throughout the subsequent years, you can try your best to make money by doing really well in school, and you can get other financial aid as a student, like I did, so that I graduated debt-free from college, which leads me to the last point there, which is how did I graduate debt-free? I'll tell you quickly. While I was in school, I worked, did internships. I maximized and doubled down on summer jobs so that I made money that way. I was very, very careful about budgeting, right? Very careful about budgeting my finances, so that I didn't overspend or didn't take out more loans than I needed. And that helped me pay it back in an efficient time. And also, and this was really important, in my last year, I think I mentioned this, at UCLA, I had a really good GPA, but I wasn't getting any scholarships, really. I just had grants. So I went to the honors program. I said, hey, do you guys have scholarships for people that have done well academically? And they said, sure, here's a binder full of scholarships. And so I went through the binder, all these documents, and kept looking at it. It was old school, like over 25 years ago, looking at all these documents. I'm like, wow, here's 3 or 4 that I actually would qualify for. So I quickly put in the applications based on my academics and what I had done in school. And lo and behold, I ended up getting like 2 or 3 of them, so that my last year of school, I made more money than I actually even owed to the school. I used that extra cash to pay off the debt. So when I graduated UCLA, I was debt free. All right, next slide. All right, next slide. There we go. Let's quickly, I want to talk a little bit about what the Right Story is. It's kind of something branded to Right Track itself. But it's really, if you guys saw, in terms of our tagline, it's discover your story, get admitted. Now, we talked a little bit about how to create your story. And now we want to talk about how you take that created story and put it onto paper for your statements. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly talk about this. This is probably one of the most fundamental things that we do here at Right Track that's taken years to perfect. And once we've done it, it just works like magic. So as you see down there in our logo, discover your story, get admitted. It all comes down to the story. I'm living proof, even though I did well in school, but I'm living proof that your application, your story is what's going to help you kind of get you over the hump, over the wall, get you into those top programs. And that's what I did. So here's how you write a personal statement, or like let's say the Common App application. Now the Common Application will have a question at the top, right? Or several questions and you choose one of them that makes the most sense for you. Let's just say the question really is about, tell us about why you want to go to college. Let's just say very basic. Why you, why now, why us? Or not us, because it's a common app, it's going to all the schools, but it's like, why you, why now, why college, right? And what do you want to do in the future? If we're going to answer that question in so many terms, and there's so many different questions that kind of play with that same concept, but you want to get this down. This is the fundamentals, right? I want you to think about life like a movie, right? I say this because I live in Los Angeles, down the street from Hollywood. So I think my head's spinning with movies. But I just felt, wow, this is a great way to think about your personal statement as a movie. So if your life is a movie, what is the opening scene? What really captivates and what pulls in the audience, right? As in any movie, if you have a very plain, boring beginning to any essay or any movie, you're going to switch off the audience. It's just a fact. And even if you don't switch them off completely because they're forced to read your statement, they're not going to be thinking, wow, I cannot wait to read more. There's going to be like, I can't wait to be done with this so I can move on to the other applicant. And you really only have one chance. If they ding you on your application statements and so forth, then you're out. So think about your life like a movie. What's the opening scene? How do you engage the audience? How do you pull them in? How do you kind of develop the story? How do you develop yourself? How do you kind of decide on what things to think about? And then how does it conclude, right? Just like a movie, right? Beginning, action sequence, climax, conclusion, right? And in that, you also want to think about what is the central takeaway message. If they had to think of one thing and they think about you, they'd be like, Bob, oh yeah, Bob's the guy that did 1, 2, and 3, and that's why he wants to go to college. Jackie's the person that really, had this life experience. She, had this crazy experience doing, cross country. She had this crazy experience helping her grandmother who was ill, whatever it would be, right? And when you think about that, that's really what you want them to kind of take away from that concept. Kind of like a TED Talk, right? When you have a TED Talk, there's really 1, 2, 3 sentences that you're going to remember about every TED Talk and what is that has to be really nailed down. So in thinking about that, let's look at this graph right here. It's exactly what they call as a story arc. A is for attention grabber. What is that thing that's going to kind of pull them in, right? That exciting moment that kind of captivates them. In a movie, it would be like a car chase or a quick succession of actions that really kind of gets the attention of the viewer. So in this case, maybe it starts off with like a biking accident, or let's say it's an argument that you have with one of your parents or a friend, and that they're like, okay, why are they arguing with their parents, or why are they arguing with this friend? And then it draws them into that kind of story. Then you get into B. So A, the first part of it really talks about, grabs their attention and pulls them in, and then teases what the story is going to be about, a little bit of a roadmap. Then you get into B, paragraph B, and B is going to be B for background, and that's going to be the character development. That's you talking about who you are, what your values are, what you stand for, how you grew up, how your parents raised you, any difficulties you faced, right? So that kind of starts developing and creates that connection between the audience and you. Then C is for really your career, and that's really the story development. Now that we know who you are and your values, we're going to learn about how you put those into actual motion, right? In terms of what you've done in your life, that really is informed by your values, who you are as a person. Then that gets you to D, direction. Now that we know who you are and what you've done, now you're going to tell them where you want to go. You want to go to college, you want to study X and Y, right? That gets them into, and again, if this is for the common application personal statement, you wouldn't include section E, because you want to make this generally broad enough, or excuse me, you could include a section E, but you're not going to talk about a specific school because it's going to all the schools. But the D direction says, I really want to become an astrophysicist. I really want to become a doctor. I really want to do X. And to do X, I really need to do this major and study in college. And that's where E comes in. And E is where you talk about the area of study that you really want to focus on and what you want to do with it in terms of your life career. Right? And then F is for finale. You bring the whole circle back, kind of saying now, you no longer argue with your parents, or now you've moved on, or now you become more independent, or whatever it is, right? That really is kind of how you would structure the story. And this, again, works really well for almost any essay that really talks about those common concepts of why you, why now, why college, and what do you want to do in the future. It really kind of answers that. Now, there's going to be other school-specific essays that are going to be completely random, like tell me about a leadership activity and so forth. And you could use these same concepts, right? Which is grab their attention, speak about the experience itself, and then speak about the learning at the end, and have that as your story arc. The the experience, pull them in, develop the story, reach a climax, what you learned, right? Those are always that kind of story arc, that flow is really how you kind of go through those essays for college. Next slide. And right here is where you're stuck and you're like, man, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, I'm panicking. Well, first thing I want you to do is gather all your data. We talked about that much early on, right? Get your resume, get your experience list, your brag list, right? Get that personal SWOT, get the university requirements, all those gathered requirements, start assembling it together. Put it out there and say, like, okay, I've got all these experiences now. How should I start putting it all together, right? And we've already started talking about the narrative, the structuring of the story. So you start outlining it. Okay, for my personal statement, I know that this experience, and this experience is really interesting. I know it matches with the 5 C's. Somehow it touches on them, right? In terms of what the schools are looking for. So I'm going to start it off this way, and that's how you start outlining and brainstorming each part of it, ideating it, putting it in the right sections. And then the way you would do it is like, once you start thinking about like what the story is going to be about and root it in, then say, okay, now how do I put this on paper? Right? A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And under A, start talking about the attention grabber, how you're going to kind of pull them in, right? And then B, start talking about your background. And then it's kind of, it seems very rudimentary and just kind of like methodical, but it's a great way of putting your ideas in the right structure. Then, C, character development. What have you done in school? What are the highlights? This is where you kind of flex all of the great things that you've done and why they should take you on as a student. D, telling them about where you want to go in the future. E, telling them about why their specific school. And then F, finale, kind of bringing it all back, right? So you kind of put A, B, C, D, structure it like that, and bullet points. Then take out those bullet points and fleshing them out into sentences. Sentences become paragraphs. Paragraphs have topic headers, conclusions, and so forth, mini conclusions, and then pull all that out, make it into an essay. Bam, presto, make sure that it flows beautifully from top to bottom, and now you've got a great essay. And then get a second opinion. I tend to say don't put too many cooks in the kitchen, but if you had to get a second opinion, which is always encouraged, look for somebody, as I say there, who's a mentor, who knows you well and knows your goals. Look for somebody who knows the admissions process and knows college applications well, so that they know if it aligns with what the schools are looking for. And then finally, the third person would be somebody who's a phenomenal writer that could really make sure that your writing is excellent. 2 quick points on this. First is, if you can find someone that is all three, amazing. If not, those are pretty much the only categories of people I would say to ask. Also, you could use AI. That's a question people are going to be asking, but you could use AI to help with the first point, even the second point, right? Which is which is kind of coming up with ideas. Like, I have the story. What do you think would make a good start to this? How should I be thinking about this, right? So you could use AI to kind of ideate. Schools don't ding you for that. You can even use AI to outline. Say, okay, paragraph 1 should include this, this should include this, should include this. Where it starts, AI becomes blurry, and you do not want to use AI is under editing and sentence structure and editing. You don't want to use AI to write the statement. That's a fact. Schools are coming down harder and harder and harder on this, because think about it. Why in the hell would the school want to give you any credit for being a good prompt writer? That you can write a good prompt in AI that will pop out an essay, and you just kind of keep refining it just through prompt writing. That is not what the school is looking for. That's not even innovative, because everybody in their godmother can do that, right? The key to success here is using AI to your advantage to help you with ideation if you don't have someone to help you, or a company like us that can help you really brainstorm and come up with discovering that story. But you want to write it yourself. And schools do reserve the right to use software like GPT-0 to basically track down which students are actually using AI. GPT-0 basically goes through a document and says, this is AI written, this is AI written, this is AI written. So that's something very important, and they will ding you. They will likely either deny your application, or or else, on a better case scenarios, they would just kind of probably write that this person used AI, and unless you have phenomenal grades and other great attributes, they're probably going to deny you down the road, because they'd rather go with someone who really authentically wrote it. Next slide. All right, now let's quickly go through submitting your application, because we've already gone through all the application components in a general overview highlight. We've talked about your personal brand, the application components. Now that you've created everything, put it together, let's submit your application. Next slide. All right. When thinking about now, you've got the applications kind of assembled, you're ready to rock and roll. You want to think about, are you going to be applying early decision, early action, or regular decision? I don't want to go too in depth in this. You guys can easily look this up online and find out. But basically, early decision, the quick and dirty about it, it gives you a higher chance of admission, but it's binding. That's the first con. Number two, the people that are using regular decision typically, I can't be 100% certain, but typically are pretty outstanding students. So even though your pool of applicants is smaller, so you'll stand out because it's a smaller pool, that pool is also of some really smart individuals. So in the bigger pool, you'll have a mix of average students and smart students and poor, not very bright students. In early decision, I think you'll end up with a pool of average to very smart students. So make it a little bit harder for you. And as I said, it's binding. So if you apply to other programs, you literally can't go to the other programs. If you apply early decision, you get admitted. Contractually, you have to go to that school. And the third ding that I think is very important for you to kind of factor in is if you do get into a school, and let's say you did apply to another school, but you have to go to the school. Even if you applied to the other school, you could apply to the other school. But if you can get admitted to the other school, you can't reject this one because you're already bound to it. And you definitely can't apply to more than one early decision school. If you apply regular decision for another school because you want to double down and just want to, hedge just in case you don't get an early decision, which is fair. And now you got into both schools, you can't negotiate financial aid because the early decision is binding and they're going to be like, we're giving you no money and you still have to come to us. So just something to think about. Quickly, early action is non-binding and you submit it earlier and you find out earlier and you have a slightly better chance in terms of it's still a smaller applicant pool. And if you get denied, it's you get pushed into the regular decision. So you got two bites at the apple. And then regular decision is regular decision, nothing that's really novel there. You guys should know what applying normally entails. Next slide. So now that you've decided which admission cycle you're going to apply to, whether it's early decision, early action, or regular decision, here's a couple of quick things that I want you to think about. Proofread. They're not going to accept anybody who's going to provide something that has spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. That's why you got second opinions and second eyes reading your documents so that you can make sure you catch all those grammar mistakes and so forth. Submit it earlier rather than just on the deadline date because the system can always break down or you may have forgotten something or you forgot this essay. You didn't cover this sufficiently. Who knows? You just don't want to leave it to the last minute. But don't rush the application. Try to submit it way earlier because if you rush it and it's half-baked, it's going to defeat the purpose for some schools. Now, some schools are deadline focused, but not all. Most of them are rolling admission, right? So if you submit something in October, you'll probably get it assessed by December, even though the application deadline is March. But if you wait all the way till March, most likely the class has already been filled and you will miss out on an opportunity to be part of that class. So again, don't rush it. Find that happy medium. I would say you don't want to submit an application really later than December. And also address any issues that may pop up, which is again why you want to do it earlier. In terms of FAFSA, which is the financial aid, which you guys may know about, and you guys have obviously seen the snafus that have been happening with FAFSA as they've been trying to update it, and that's kind of backfired. So we can talk a little bit about that as well. And you want to make sure that you get your GPA verifications, especially if you're out of the country. Make sure that you get all your transcripts in and so forth. So you don't want to submit, as I said, so late that if there's mistakes, you won't have time to course correct. Post submissions, it's not done. Once you press submit, it's not over. You want to stay active. So in case that you're waitlisted, then we'll talk a little bit about that. You have some things to talk about, right? So that's going to be important is that you stay active because you can say, since I applied, I got the scholarship or I got this accomplishment or I completed this goal or I got this, I achieved this honor or I did this volunteer experience. So you can speak about it and tell them what you've done since. It kind of helps increase your chances if you're on a wait list. Prepare for the interview itself. That's a whole production. A lot of colleges do ask for that. So there's a way of thinking about that. So you want to start thinking about how to prepare for that interview. If you have AP classes or the IB, you want to make sure you're acing them because some schools make your acceptance contingent on your end grades, especially for the IB, for example. In other cases, again, if you're waitlisted, you want to show them that you've done very well in your AP so that they can feel more of a sense of comfort accepting you to that program. And finally, if you haven't heard back from the school, from your top choices, but you've heard back from some, I would wait until about March, April, and then start sending emails to those universities. Say, hey, I haven't heard back from you. I've already heard back from these 3 universities. You're my top choice. I just want to see where you guys stand in the process, and if you need anything further from me. Next slide. So these are really your only 3 outcomes. Either denied, you're either deferred, waitlisted, or you're accepted. So if you're denied, honestly, that's why you've diversified, because it really is hard to overcome a denial unless it's a clerical error. Like you submitted your transcripts, they never got it. You have proof that you submitted your transcripts. They never chased you up to say, hey, we don't have your transcripts, and they just denied you. Well, you can say, I submitted it, here's proof, and they'd be like, oh, oops, and then they can go through your application. So that's where they can have denied you, and then they can kind of reconsider it. But typically a denial is it. And that's kind of where you really want to be thinking about the fact that you diversified, so you have other options. Then you have a chance of being deferred. Deferred basically is being pushed from like regular decision, early action, early decision to regular decision. So you got deferred. Somebody from regular decision, listen, you weren't accepted into the class right now, but we're going to push you to the regular decision group of people, group of applicant pool. And so you have a second bite at the apple. And typically, I don't think there's much you can do once you get deferred. You just land in that, and they reevaluate you among a bigger pool of applicants. Or you got waitlisted, which means that it's probably around February, March, and they've already filled their class and already accepted the people that they really prioritized. But they like your application, but they're not 100% sure they like this person better. But if that person that they like better declines them because they want to go to another school, then if you're on the wait list and a priority wait list, you move off the wait list and you're accepted. So if you're on the wait list, and some schools will just say, just tell us if you want to stay on the wait list or not, then do that. Some schools will be like, is there anything you want to update us on? And that's where you update them with a letter of continued interest, a LOKI. And the letter of continued interest really should start off talking about what you've been doing since you applied. And the second part of it really talks about why that school is your top choice. If you're accepted, don't rush and accept it. Wait, pause. You waited for them. Now they can wait for you for a little bit before you have to give them a response. And here you want to evaluate your offer. Did they give you financial aid? Did they not? Take a look and make sure that the major, aligns with what you want. Go back to the school, make sure that the vibe fits, that you feel good about that school. Because if you have a couple of choices, you want to be in a position of at least choosing the school that makes the most sense for you, and not just kind of rushing into it. Okay, so those are the kind of things that you want to think about in terms of denial, defer, waitlisted, or accepted. All right, next. All right, and let's do a quick recap for you for the process itself. Here's the timeline strategy, guys. So we're in June now, June 11th. So right there, you should be thinking about what are you going to do this summer so that you're not just kind of relaxing. If there's holes in your application, right? You don't have enough volunteer experience. You don't have enough professional experience. You don't have enough, extracurricular, leadership, teamwork. This is your chance this summer to really kind of beef it up so that you can put yourself in the best position possible, right? So you want to make sure that you have your summer activities lined up and you're jumping straight into it. And if you literally have nothing to do, then take some summer classes. Because if you do really well, then that can help your, you could showcase that on your application as well. This is where you sign up for standardized testing. As you guys saw, quite a few schools have gone from test optional to test requirement, or no test requirement to test optional. I believe the UCs still are no test requirements in terms of standardized tests, but a lot of other schools are now going back to, like Harvard and so forth, are going back to requiring standardized testing. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have a tutor, you've lined up when you're going to take it, and you have a game plan. Select the major, we talked about that. Selecting the colleges, we talked about that. Do that over the summer. This is a good time to go with your parents and travel around the country to figure out what school makes the most sense for you based on your criteria, and we gave you an idea of that. Start preparing the application, piece it together, right? Start thinking about your recommenders and talking to them, right? Start thinking about what you're going to write in your personal statement. Start gathering your transcripts. Start putting together your resume, right? Put all those things together, and you should be doing that really over the summer and into the early fall. Make sure to get the transcript and the GPA verification, especially if you have a GPA like I did. I did the IB, and so you want to make sure that the GPA verification has gone through and that they give you and compute for you a GPA that you can apply to. Next slide. Then get ready for the submissions process, whether it's early action, early decision, which usually happens sometime around November, end of October, November, or if you're going to be going regular decision, which is going to be around December, January. But like we said, we definitely advise you not to submit anything later than Christmas for sure, because you really are way behind the 8 ball at that point. Make sure that you're looking into financial aid. I said September to December. I would even say August through December. You want to make sure that you're figuring out what scholarships and so forth, getting them lined up and getting ready to apply to them. If you're an international student, boom, you want to be thinking about your visa process. If you're thinking about, obviously going to a school that's away from home, then you want to think if you're going to have on-campus or off-campus housing, think about that after Christmas really and into the spring. Especially if you go visit the school, then you have an idea. And then the final decision really happens between March and May. That's when you find out. That's really when you find out about which school you got into, and then having to submit the deposit, and then and pretty much start attending the orientations and so forth. All right, next slide. Now I want to spend, we're kind of coming very close to the end of this, but I want to spend a couple of, maybe a minute or two on this. Forward thinking for future proofing. Guys, during college, these are very, very important factors to help you be more relevant for the future. First thing I want to talk about is interdisciplinary studies. Think creative, think innovative. Don't just take maybe one major, but maybe take a minor, 2 minors, 2 majors, or at least audit classes and take classes in different areas, or at least try different things. Like even though you're a history major, try applying to like an entrepreneurship society or something like that, just to kind of diversify an interdisciplinary approach to your education, right? Transferable skills. Think about not just your hard skills, like what you're learning in the classroom, but the soft skills, the emotional skills. And we talk about that in terms of collaborative, creative, right? Curious. Those things that really make you compassionate, make you kind of more human. That's the way that you really are able to defeat, I'm not going to say defeat the robots, I don't want to sound like that, but are able to keep yourself relevant, because the future is all about interhuman and human-centric interaction. If you don't have that and you're just myopically focused in a lab, your job could potentially be automated. And finally, build a community while you're in school. Very, very important. Mentors, professionals, right? People that really can kind of look out for you, that you can ask questions to, especially if they're younger, but even older folks as well, who've been around the block and have understood life. They can give you some really good insights to make sure that that you are on track and that you're not off base, so to speak. After college, I think it's also important to kind of think about that, is continuous learning. I am constantly taking online classes, doing all kinds of things. I do a bunch of things, not just running this company. As I say, I travel the world. I have a passion project. I'm a lawyer, so I do legal work as well. I'm an entrepreneur by heart, so I advise companies strategically and operationally. So I try to really kind of take on online classes and get practical experience. It gives me more of a holistic perspective on any kind of job situation. I try to stay informed in terms of market trends and market demands. As I said, I'm a lawyer, so I'm always trying to figure out how does legal AI going to disrupt and upend the legal field, so that, again, I'm not blindsided. And finally, prepare to pivot, which is very important, reskilling, upskilling, to get yourself in a position that helps you and prepares you that if you need to pivot in terms of career, you can do that without being completely blindsided. So just some things to think about. I'm going to put this as a new chapter in the book because I think there's so much here and that students need to be mindful of from high school and beyond. Next slide. A little bit about who we are. I'm going to kind of blitz through this. I think you understood from kind of who I am, and my experts are probably 2-3x even smarter than me in terms of the admissions process. So you'd be in very, very good hands. But what we focus on, anything from engineering, health, social sciences, technology, finance, these are all areas of expertise that we have, that we've helped students get into these programs, and many, many more since 2008. Next slide. These are the main things. I don't want to kind of talk too much about it, and I do encourage you guys to email us, reach out to us, and we'll tell you a little bit about if you're in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. We've got something for everyone, because our job here, essentially, and most important, is to prepare you so that you can become the best college applicant possible. So these are all different programs that we've created, from seed or pre-seed, seed, compass, and finally CAP. Are all these programs that we've created to help you along the journey, so that you're not kind of coming to us in the final hour of 12th grade and be like, I don't have any of these experiences that these applications, these schools are asking for. What do I do? Then you're SOL, right? That's your luck. So here we prepare you for that whole journey so that you have all those experiences as you go forward. Next slide. We have something called the GSET framework, and this is what happens when we start actually working with you on your applications in the fall of your 12th grade year. Guiding, helping you with all the resources that we have, story crafting, what we described, writing the right story and the story arc and so forth, editing to perfect your applications, right? We never write your essays for you, obviously. You write them, but we help you edit them. And then timekeeping to make sure that you're on time, submit on time, and stay ahead of the curve. Next slide. Our success rate speaks for itself, 93%. We've worked with people from over 34 countries over the last 16 years. We've helped people in over 129 programs at this point. I've mentioned to you some of the program areas that we're really strong in and majors and so forth. And one of our key things that we do is we make the application process 50% less in terms of time committed to it than if you were to do it on your own. Sometimes it will take you a month, 2 months, 3 months to do it. We can wrap everything up within weeks to a month and so forth, because we're so quick and so good at helping you come up with a story, helping you put it on paper, perfecting it and submitting it. Next slide. Our team, outstanding individuals, as you see right there. We've got somebody from University of Chicago, somebody graduated top of their class from Princeton, somebody went to NYU. So we have people from outstanding, diverse backgrounds that really are. Our team is just stacked full of really, really incredible individuals. Next slide. These are the schools. Just get a little peek about the schools of the schools we've helped people get into, from Stanford to Duke, UCLA, Cambridge in England, Harvard, and so forth. Next slide. And now, just to kind of end it at the 1 hour and 1 minute mark, basically, if you come to us within the next 24 hours, we're going to give you 25% off our mastery course, which I highly advise you, because it's everything I've been saying in video form and in a comprehensive book that you would receive from us. Plus, you would be getting a free consultation as well, and a free mastery checklist, so that you can go through and make sure that you're getting all the things done that we discussed today. So highly advise you, as a first step, to get the mastery course. And if you come with us within the next 24 hours and you put in that code, then we will give that to you at 25%. And in fact, I'm also going to throw this out there. The first 3 people that message us right now to our email, info@RightTrackAdmissions, will get the course for free. The first 3 people. Thereafter, it's 25% off for the first 24 hours. And thereafter, it's regular price. Thank you for joining us. Please, I know we have 2 questions, which is great. I love questions. I'd rather do a whole webinar just on questions. So let's quickly run through the questions. What are some of the common mistakes that students make on the applications that we should avoid? Common mistakes. Personal statements are going to be using ChatGPT, which literally are going to be found by the school and they're going to be denied. Personal statements that are so cliche and redundant because they found it online, or they just rushed it and they just quickly put it together. So that's, I think, one of the most common mistakes, is rushing the personal statement and the documents that you submit to the schools, that you just rush it and you wait till the end. Another common mistake is not diversifying your application to the different schools. So all you do is you focus on 2 schools. Guess what? You get denied. You're like, well, I got denied. I'm going to go to community college, or not go to college at all. That's a second mistake. I'm going to throw a third mistake in there. People picking the wrong recommenders. They think that this guy has their back or this lady has their back, and they don't. And the recommendation comes out horrible or very mediocre. And then they get dinged and they wonder why. And it was because they picked the wrong recommenders, because they probably rushed the recommender to write the recommendation. So there you go. Using ChatGPT to write their essays, rushing their essays, which is full of mistakes and is not authentic and is not really germane to who they are, and picking the wrong recommenders, which is why you want to do these things early enough. And again, if you work with folks like us, admissions experts, we will be able to provide you with guardrails to prevent you from falling into those mistakes. Second question: how should we balance extracurricular activities with academic? Great question. When I say the schools want a well-rounded individual with high EQ and high IQ, you cannot discount that. Obviously, academics is paramount. Super, super, super important. But you've got to find a way where those key qualities, those 5 C's I talked about, which I can't even remember all of them right now: collaborative, compassionate, curious, committed, and so forth. Those key qualities should be exhibited in your extracurriculars. If they're not exhibited in your extracurriculars, then you're wasting your time with the extracurricular. You can double down on the academics. But your extracurricular should showcase those key qualities, those C's, that the school wants. So let's say use C as competencies, those key competencies that the school wants of their students. So pick extracurricular activities that kind of focus with that. And which I didn't have time to talk about, but it's in the book and in the course, choose extracurriculars that are a mile deep and an inch wide. As in, you really get involved with this group. I mean, if you pick Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts and you do it for like 5, 6, 7 years, it shows you're going to graduate from a member to a sub leader to a leader to like the head honcho. They want to see that growth. So I recommend, if you're going to balance academics or extracurriculars as well, is pick 2 or 3 extracurriculars max that talk about the 5 C's, the 5 competencies, and are a mile deep and an inch wide, where you really have a very in-depth understanding and you've grown with that organization and taken it to the next level. Those are very, very important things that you should be thinking about. Again, as you can see, I can do this all day, every day. I love doing this stuff. There's a lot to think about. The college application process is in some ways convoluted. It is stressful, but it is something that is surmountable, and you can definitely stand out. And having a phenomenal academic degree as an undergraduate can really spell the difference in the rest of your life, in terms of graduate schools, in terms of career paths, in terms of future proofing, in terms of the people you meet. So you really, really want to double down and make sure that you are doing the best you can on your college applications. And we are here to help you through the process. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We look forward to helping you into your dream college, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully on the next webinar.